Welcome to the Reel Rematch, the podcast where we unpack Hollywood's twin films, sometimes cloned on purpose, sometimes by accident, but always in competition. Today's matchup, take my fighter jets away. Top Gun versus Iron Eagle. Two high-octane tales of hotshot pilots released about 4 months apart. Which one triumphed at the box office? Which one endured in memory? And which film truly owns the skies? All right, Jeff, this is one that we've circled a little way out. Flyboys. Top Gun versus Iron Eagle.
Mate, where to start? Two interesting jet fighter films from 1986. I'm looking forward to this. Let's go.
Alrighty. So, again, we like to compare and contrast and sort of like talk about how can two films about, the sort of like same topic or share so many sort of overlapping themes come out, roughly at the same time or within such a short period of time, and how this keeps happening over and over and over and over again. So, first of all, one's not a rip-off of each other. Again, this is really, something in the water, something in the zeitgeist where these two films really, sort of like came about in the same place. A lot of synthesis of literature that's out there is just saying that, these films came out during, Ronald Reagan's military build-up, right?
Yep.
Glorify individual heroism, high-tech warfare, and sort of Cold War ideals.
Yep.
The release of these films kind of like really coincided with a wider revival of sort of like, patriotic sort of like action films in the 80s. So think Rambo, First Blood Part 2, Red Dawn, that goes alongside these and otherwise. So I think there was this really sort of like strong influence again from, maybe as a reaction to, I guess, the social and the political climate, especially in the United States. I mean, the other thing that I do want to mention as well is that there was this huge teen escapist fantasy, it was like a movement or I don't know how to appropriately, sort of like name it or codify it or otherwise, but, you had these teen escapist fantasy films. And I don't know if that is a reaction to, this whole concept of impending doom, like, nuclear threat or, constant war or, whatever was going on. But you think about the teen escapist fantasy films, and obviously Iron Eagle is firmly in that genre or subgenre of films, right? In no particular order, it probably kind of like kicked off maybe with Tron in 1982, where, the video game designer gets sucked into the computer world. But then you've also got, The Never-Ending Story and Dreamscape, The Last Starfighter. All of these things came out in 84. I probably missed War Games that came out in 83. Again, A teenage hacker accidentally starts a nuclear scare. Then you've got like, the Goonies in 85. You had Back to the Future in 85. Explorers, where the kids built a spaceship in their backyard using dreams and junkyard parts.
Yeah.
Real Genius, one of your favorites, starring Val Kilmer, where a teen science prodigy, outsmarts the military industrial complex and fires a space laser. Weird Science, where two nerds create the perfect woman with a computer. Teen Wolf, right?
Yes.
Literally a high school underdog or otherwise becomes a werewolf, literally overnight, and becomes the best basketball player of his team and gets, sort of a whole heap of popularity and otherwise. There's The Legend of Billie Jean, where a teen girl becomes a rebel icon after standing up to injustice. So that came out in 85. It starts to taper off a little bit, but, you still had Flight of the Navigator in 1986, where a boy disappears, returns with a cool alien ship, and various powers, and then Rad for you and I being sort of like proud Aussies, that came out in 86, where BMX kid dreams of racing professionally and taking down corporate bad guys.
Yep.
So there was like this huge, as I said, like, almost movement where there was like, these films felt like they were coming out every few months, teen escapist fantasy films. And again, maybe a reaction to what was going on in the world around them, sort of like more broadly. And obviously these military films were sort of, de rigueur of the day with, sort of the patriotism and kind of like, sort of the new day in America as Ronald Reagan was kind of like espousing at the time. What did you find in your research, or how do you think about these two films and why did they come out, a few months apart?
Yeah, interestingly, they were both scheduled to come out at the same time. So Iron Eagle actually came first, but it actually moved. So they're originally both slated to open summer 86, but when the Iron Eagle team found out that Top Gun was coming out it came out in May of 86, they actually brought Iron Eagle forward, and that's why it opened in January of 86 instead. In terms of what I found about how these two started, so Bruckheimer and Simpson bought an article from a sort of journalist whose name was Ehud Yoneh, who'd written an article called Top Guns that was in California Magazine in 1983. So that's when they bought the rights to this and started working on it back in 83. That was about the pilots in the program at the Top Gun fighter school and living in what was then jokingly called Fighter Town, USA. Sidney J. Furie, the man who wrote and directed Iron Eagle, he actually came up with the idea with his co-writer. For some reason, they were inspired by the Olympics in 1984. So something about the Olympics in LA, because they were both living in LA and the Olympics was in LA in 1984. Something about that inspired them to do this film. I don't know how you take a jump from the Olympics to teenagers flying F-16 fighter planes, but that's how these came into fruition. So they kind of just evolved separately, but along the same timelines.
Again, it was the zeitgeist or something in the water.
I think so.
Kind of like reacting to kind of like the world around them. I think there was great interest. Obviously, the rise of, technology and things being at the cutting edge, and you put that into combat and people, wanting to sort of, fervently support kind of like national interests and, sort of like be proud of, military prowess and otherwise, and these two films just, came from maybe similar, sort of stimuli, produced and created by sort of like two different, creative teams. So, I mean, like super interesting. It just keeps happening time and time again. Like just when you think, you've got a good idea, chances are it's not unique and someone else has got the same idea that, that you have. And I think this is another example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've looked at, we keep looking at these films that come out at the same time and they don't seem to, it's not like one has taken from the other and gone, oh, they're making that film, we'll make that film. They're all kind of just somehow get brought into the system together.
Organically, right?
Yeah.
And they just, it's I think it goes to show that, a lot of these things are really, like a time capsule for when they were made, because they really are like good art does, right? It's really there to sort of hold up a mirror, recontextualize and get audiences interacting or thinking about certain circumstances in different, and different ways, new ways, and, this is, I think a really interesting example of that. I mean, like there's a bit of a contrast in that in terms of, Top Gun's obviously more, sort of like naval fighter flight, and they're using the F-14s. Iron Eagle's more F-16s and coming from, an Air Force perspective, and otherwise. But I think that's playing around the edges like that. Yeah. Both, so for the most part, films that involve, sort of highly trained, sort of like fighter pilots taking down the enemy and making sure that America wins the day, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So, maybe let's run the numbers. I mean, it's almost an unfair comparison because obviously, the impact and the cultural impact that Top Gun had, and probably still has to this day, obviously to a lesser extent, is really kind of like unrivaled. I don't think too many of these films ever really have the cultural impact that Top Gun had. Whereas Iron Eagle was, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's like a B movie, teen fantasy. You would have thought it was a great like TV movie. As a kid of the 80s, of the sort of right age, having been born sort of like late 70s and sort of like watching this, like you always wanted to watch young boys, fulfill fantasies and wish fulfillment and otherwise. So this film developed a real cult following and otherwise.
Yeah.
They actually made another 3.
Yes, ironically they did, but that's because they did good numbers on home video. Right. So if you want the numbers, so as I said, Iron Eagle came out first, released January 86 because it was brought forward. Top Gun was released in May of 86. And like you said, this is the tale of a film versus a blockbuster, realistically. All right. So Iron Eagle came first in January 17th, 86. It opened a 6.1 million opening weekend. It was the number one movie that week. Ended its run with about 24.1 million overall. That's domestic only in the US and Canada. Can't find any data at all that it was actually released anywhere or what the numbers were anywhere else in the world theatrically. Right. Now, I do remember seeing this film on VHS at some point back in those days. So, but it only had a budget of somewhere between 10 and 15 million. So it returned 2.5 times for the studio, but then it took more than $11 million in home video sales back in the day, which allowed them to then continue on and make, 3 more of them. But then you get to Top Gun, all right? Opened May 16th, 1986. Opening weekend was 8.2 million. So it wasn't huge, but it was decent. It had traction and popularity and went on to earn $180.4 million domestically, which in those days is phenomenal. Overseas, it did just as well, taking another $177 million. So it ended up grossing out for a worldwide total of $357.4 million, which in 1986 is crazy numbers. It was the number 1 highest grossing film of 86 across the board. It was in the top 10 movies at the US box office from opening weekend until November. So from May until November, It was in the top 10 of films in the US box office.
And I mean, that's hard to even fathom, right? In the age of, streaming and 45-day release windows before, things go to streaming or sort of, premium video on demand where you're sort of like paying, sort of the price of a single admission ticket that you would pay at the cinemas at home just to get access to that. These are the days where, films could be in cinemas for like 6+ months, right? I mean, I always the film I always remember because it felt like it was on for like 2.5 years was The Gods Must Be Crazy, right? And again, like another kind of like mid-80s kind of like film that just felt like it was on or screened somewhere forever.
I remember there's a local cinema where we grew up, that Raiders of the Lost Ark played for 2 years.
Wow.
And they advertised it. Now been playing for 1 year. It used to be on the...
It's like a badge of honour. Right?
Exactly. Because again, obviously tickets were different in those days. We're talking around the birth of VHS, so we didn't really have that at the time. So if you wanted to see these films again, you paid your $5 and you went again. But you did. You went and saw Raiders 2 or 3 times. You went and saw Top Gun 2 or 3 times. You went and saw Die Hard 2 and 3 times because you enjoyed the film, you loved the film, and the only way to see it again was to go back and watch it in the cinema again.
And, and there was less entertainment options, like we obviously didn't have smartphones, we didn't have, sort of pay TV or
streaming, like you said,
that we have over here. And, gaming was still, I think, in its infancy and what have you back then. So, it's a very different time, right? But, just talking about the numbers and otherwise, I was going to go with this later, but I think let's mention it now, Jeff, if you're okay with that. And, after adjusting for inflation, this was Tom Cruise's highest grossing film at the domestic box office. So that's US and Canada for all intents and purposes, until it was surpassed by its own sequel, Top Gun Maverick, in 2022.
Yeah, that's huge.
I mean, like that is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Like it takes almost 40 years for him to kind of outdo his sort of like top grossing film. I mean, that's how big this film was. And this is the film that made Tom Cruise a superstar.
Absolutely. I mean, he'd done some decent roles prior to this, but this was the film that took him into that stratosphere.
And, and he earned $1 million.
Yeah.
He earned $1 million for this film. I think what's interesting, right, is the film he did before this was Legend. That was directed by Ridley Scott, or Sir Ridley Scott. And then his younger brother, Tony, directs him in Top Gun. Now, Legend was a bit of a misfire, so probably, it had its moments, but not sort of like one of Sir Ridley's best. And then he comes into this, he needs a hit, and this becomes a massive, massive hit and cultural phenomenon.
Oh, totally. I mean, people have been talking about Top Gun since 1986.
Yeah.
All the way up until Top Gun Maverick came out, right?
When was the last time you talked about Legend? Other than 2 minutes ago.
I don't know, 10 years ago when I told you the same story.
Yeah, 100%.
So you're right. But yeah, in terms of cultural impact, Top Gun has that and always and has been like that since it came out.
Now, Jeff, keep going on the cultural impact, right? There was obviously a high level of involvement, from the US Navy and the Department of Defense in, Top Gun. I mean, I think, break that down for us because, that's massive.
So, yeah, obviously the US military has a film arm, right? The Department of Defense. Each division of the US military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all those guys have their own film office, so to speak. The production came in and asked if they could be involved and they got full support. They liked what the story was. They did ask for some changes that were made, but basically the production gave $1.8 million to the military, which when you consider the budget on this was $15 million, that's more than 10% of the budget went to the military. You're just saying alone Tom got $1 million himself. So, but that allowed them to shoot at Miramar, use the jets, involve the F-14s. They chose to use the F-14s because they thought thought they were more visually impactful than the F-16s at the time, which were being used, but they didn't. But that gave them access to the planes, also to the aircraft carriers that are used at the beginning and the end of the film. And interestingly, I found out that apparently it cost around $7,600 per hour for the jets, because of the cost of using them, fighter fuel, flying time, etc., etc. That's how much. That's why they spent.
That's real money. That's USD.
That's USD, yeah. Absolutely. The military, the only thing they called for, and that's part of what they do with their process, is they call for changes to align with military protocols.
Mm-hmm.
So in the original script, Charlie was not non-military. She was actually a military personnel. She was a sort of trainer pilot person.
Right.
But at the time, there were strict non-fraternization rules inside the US military, so they asked them to change that. And there was one other change, and I can't remember what that was. I'll come back to you on that one. It might be in my trivia section.
But then talk about how, I mean, like, so many critics at the time said, hey, this is pretty much like an unofficial, recruitment video, say, for the US Navy, right? And, you were sharing with me before that the US Navy stated the film's popularity resulted in a 500% increase in the number of recruits wanting to enter their aviation program.
Yep.
Paramount even offered to include a Navy recruitment ad on the initial home video release in exchange for debt side to the US Navy. However, the ad agency that produced the ads to the US military informed the Pentagon that the movie itself was enough propaganda. They actually didn't need to pay for any extra ads. And apparently, they set up recruiting booths outside cinemas.
Because they got so many questions and queries about it. Yeah, particularly in California was a big one, apparently. And I think it was somewhere in mid-US, like Arizona was apparently a big one. But
right.
Yeah, they set up tables and had recruiting stations inside the cinemas for this thing. There's even anecdotes about the fact that current captains, majors, admirals in the Navy all joined the Navy in the 80s because of Top Gun. And they're now the leaders of the current US military of the naval services. So it's quite ironic that's again, from that alone shows its cultural impact. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, it's quite incredible. And look, let's think about any real life inspiration or other interesting sort of like real life, sort of influences or otherwise for Iron Eagle. Were you able to find anything there?
In terms of real life? I don't think I found anything real life. All I know is that they had the complete opposite. Iron Eagle did not get any support from the DoD. They actually refused to help them because they didn't like the story. Because the story, like you said, it's that fantasist escapist version, which is you got a bunch of teenage kids who somehow are involved on a US Air Force base, and all of them circumvent the entire system, manage to get 2 completely loaded, armed, flight-approved F-16s and managed to get away with, let's just say, as they even say in the film, stealing them from the US Air Force, right? So because of that, they got absolutely, the DoD refused to help them. The Air Force refused to help them. They actually ended up getting because there is some good F-16 jet action in this, they're all Israeli jets.
Right.
So the production went and the Israeli Air Force agreed to help them. So all the jets, the good guys and the bad guys in this are all Israeli F-16s and Israeli other jets that are painted to look like the bad guys' jets. So
fascinating.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
So look, kind of let's get into the directors then, right? Or maybe we'll start with Top Gun. We'll get into one of my favorite directors of all time. I mean, in terms of he's produced films that I've rewatched probably a lot more than a lot of other sort of directors sort of like canon of films and otherwise. And then Tony Scott.
Yep.
I mean, the crazy thing is this was his second feature film.
Yes.
Right? He did that vampire film back in 83. I think it's got David Bowie's in it called The Hunger.
Yep.
And then he did this, right? And apparently, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, producers of Top Gun, they saw an advertisement that he did that was, like a Saab car or race car or otherwise racing a Saab fighter jet or plane, right? And they went, wow, that's our guy.
Yeah.
Right. And there's interesting because, the scene is somewhat kind of, recreated and otherwise where you've got Tom Cruise speeding on his motorcycle. Obviously, as the F-14s go off in the background and otherwise, and he's fist pumping and doing the usual sort of like Tom Cruise thing. But I mean, second film. Right, and becomes the cultural phenomenon that he does, turns Tom Cruise into sort of like a global superstar. And there's so many visual flourishes and otherwise that you see in this film. Like it honestly feels that it's literally the work of a visual sort of auteur. I mean, like this guy was made for this very moment to produce this very film where
there was a real call out for like, this MTV, fast editing, highly bombastic, sort of like super visual and stylized sort of, stuff. And like, Tony Scott obviously been quite an incredible commercial director.
Yes.
He's obviously the guy, but like, he was like one out of the box. He's one of my favorite sort of visual directors of all time. I just think he's incredible. And like after this, obviously Simpson and Bruckheimer love what they saw. He does Beverly Hills Cop 2
yes.
in 87, which I actually love and I think is more rewatchable than the first one. I think the first one's a better film, but I think the second one's more rewatchable.
Yeah.
Then he does like Revenge,
yes.
With Costner in 90. He does, and also Days of Thunder comes out same year in 90, which, some people just pretty much say it's Top Gun on wheels.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Not an unfair statement. He follows that with The Last Boy Scout in 91, one of my favorite sort of comedy action films of all time.
I do love Last Boy Scout as well. Yeah.
True Romance, my favorite film. It came out in 93. Then it's Crimson Tide in 95. Like, what a decade.
Yeah.
Right? And it all launches off the back of this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our guy Tony Scott.
Yeah, like you said, visually, I think, and they've seen that in the commercial for what he can bring to it, and like you said, part of the zeitgeist. He's without denigrating the film, he's basically created an ad for the Navy, but it's visually amazing. It's visually captive. You know what I mean?
And like everything he does, right? And all of the choices that he makes is like, how can I make this look more exciting?
Yeah.
Right? How can I make the images just pop? Right? And this is one of the things that he almost has no equal for, right? And like Michael Bay owes his career to someone like Tony Scott, right? Hey, here's the playbook, pal, right? Just follow some of this stuff, right? Now, not to sort of like talk Michael Bay down or otherwise, because he did a couple of flourishes, that went above and beyond, but he was standing on the shoulders of giants, by way of Tony Scott, and like everything that he does, where it's like, he obviously partnered with Jeffrey Kimball, who's DOP or cinematographer on this one, who also, worked with him on Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 87, Revenge in 90, and then True Romance in 93. But it's just like, oh, okay, bang, I want the graduated tobacco kind of like filter when I'm looking at the sky, hey, we've got the aircraft here. I want to set it against the backdrop of kind of like the setting sun. And I want to see the smoke come off sort of like, the asphalt or the tarmac. The guys are playing volleyball. Guys, I want you oiled up, like.
Yeah. I want to see the heat shimmer as you play as the ball. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Just like all those choices that he makes time and time again. His use of color, like, it's just incredible. And like, you can tell that he just had that real flourish. There's that small scene towards the start of Top Gun where I think they're just in a control tower or otherwise, right? And like, I didn't have to kind of like squint my eyes or otherwise, but it's almost like that looks like it was done for Crimson Tide, right? And like he's just like he just knows how to frame, he knows how to block, he knows what's going to work, and he knows visually what's really going to make something pop. And he just does that time and time again. And like I think some of the the iconic imagery that he's created for this film has been like so ripped off or or iterated or borrowed
totally
or influenced others.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. And it was his second film.
Yeah. Well, like you talk about the footage. So footage from Top Gun was in episodes of MacGyver and was used in episodes of Jag. So because they're the same production company.
It's incredible.
So, yeah.
So now let's jump over to, and it's almost unfair because you're talking about one of the best visual, cinema artists, personally, for mine over the last 40, 50 years in Tony Scott. So, I don't want to sort of, punch down or otherwise on Sidney J. Furie. But look, of note, I've got to be honest, never would have recall his name or otherwise, right?
Yeah.
A cool name, if nothing else. But he actually did the Ipcris File in 1965, which is a thriller of note with Michael Caine.
Yes, I do remember that.
He made the Entity in 1982, which is really disturbing, starring Barbara Hershey and Lon Silver.
Yeah. That's
where there's lots of, amorous liaisons with spirits and ghosts and otherwise. So that was interesting. He did a Vietnam film that I've never heard of called Purple Hearts in 1984. He does this in 86, and then he follows it up with Superman 4 Quest for Peace in 87, which is a steaming pile and the worst Superman film ever made.
Yep.
And then he came back to Iron Eagle 2 in 1988. He made two other films, and then he came back to the Iron Eagle universe in 95 with Iron Eagle on the Attack, which was the fourth film, obviously opting out of the third one in the Iron Eagle world, and actually still starred Louis Gossett Jr.
Yeah. I didn't know about it. What I found as well, he actually, same thing, he's been directing since the 50s. So he's obviously an older, at this point in time, he's older, quite a bit older probably than Tony was, right? Let's be honest. But he also, here's an interesting one. No, same thing. I found the same information as you, but he actually made another Vietnam flick in 1978 called The Boys in Company C, right? Which Kubrick cites as the direct inspiration for Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, fascinating.
So Kubrick finds that that's and actually stars Ali Ermey as
as a drill
instructor
as well.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, you know what? I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that to the queue when I get home, or maybe sort of rent that off one of the streaming services or otherwise.
Yeah,
that is. I mean, it just goes to show. I mean, like, look, the thing is, like, you know, to your point, like, solid working director who had like a 50, 60-year career, which is incredible, right? In any field, right?
Yeah.
So a real workman-like director, and I think you would characterise him as a workman-like director. Like, doesn't have any of the visual flourishes or otherwise as Tony Scott. But Tony Scott, in some regard, was almost a bit of an auteur. I think highly underrated, almost criminally underrated. I think kind of like in his time. Left us too soon, obviously, with his tragic passing in sort of like, 2012. But I think, people's, revisiting of sort of his films and rethinking about this. I mean, even like, critically with this film was, somewhat derided when it first came out.
Yeah.
And I actually do think that Top Gun Maverick is a better film. However, you don't get Maverick if you don't get Top Gun. And I certainly don't think if it was released today, it would be as, reviled or sort of like, punched down on like it was, I think, sort of like upon release. Audiences loved it day one because it is a crowd pleaser. It's an audience pleaser. It's not trying to be anything else. It's not trying to make a big statement. It's not, trying to do anything else other than maybe, surreptitiously or otherwise recruit people to the US Navy. But, it's a fun popcorn flick.
Oh, totally. But in terms of what you say for praise, like critics they don't have great scores. Top Gun only sits at 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. Right? 7 out of 10 on IMDb and only 50 on Metacritic. I mean, Iron Eagle, admittedly, is not the greatest film. Going back to what you said about, as escapists as kids, I remember watching this back in the day going, this is awesome, steal a plane and fly over and destroy the bad guy, blah, blah. Watching it again now, I'm like, this is just shit. It's a shit film. So it's sitting at 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's only got 5.5 out of 10 on IMDb and it has a 41 on Metacritic. So it's not the great. But again, Top Gun, 83% popcorn meter on Rotten Tomatoes. So, yes, audiences love it. Iron Eagle's at 57. So, again, they're not, I think it shows the difference between the two films.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. Like, one's like really big budget, slick Hollywood film, released by, one of the sort of like esteemed, Hollywood studios in Paramount.
Yeah.
And the other one, is kind of like a fun, B film that's meant to be video nasty, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, let's talk about other things that are kind of like similar, kind of like pop up. So I know towards, again, the start of Top Gun, Tom Cruise is on his motorbike. He's racing towards Miramar or Fightertown, USA. He's on his bike, he's done the fist pump as sort of like the planes are taking off and landing in the background. Very similar scene in Iron Eagle where you've got, sort of like the young boys like racing out of the army base, which he would have had MPs chasing him. He would have had about 1,000 fines if he actually did that, or maybe, I don't know, sort of detained or otherwise. But he's like race along in his car, with sort of like the jets in the background and otherwise. So there was that comparison as well.
I did note that they were both very, very similar scenes.
And very interestingly, so there was actually a stunt pilot called Art Scholl who worked on both films. So he was obviously working on Top Gun. He was in the
Cessna. He flew the Cessna on the snake.
Sort of like the Cessna versus the motorbike sort of like race that they have in Iron Eagle. And very tragically though, on Top Gun, he was killed during the production of the movie, age 54.
Yeah.
He plunged into the Pacific Ocean, and apparently they never determined the exact cause of the crash, and they never recovered the aircraft or his body.
Yeah, that's right. So his death is reported as accidental because there's no.
So the film was dedicated to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously that's quite tragic. But there was obviously that connective tissue between both films. So I thought that was quite interesting. The other really interesting crossover between both films is that Louis Gossett Jr., who obviously stars in Iron Eagle, apparently he was considered for the role of Viper.
I had that as well.
That was played by Tom Skerritt. And again, another older mentor type role. He more or less kind of, swap one out for the other. So I don't know if he didn't make the final cut or otherwise. And look, you know what? Like, I've got to admit, I think Gossett Jr. would have done a good job in Top Gun. I really like him in Iron Eagle. I think he's a better fit in Iron Eagle, and I think Tom Skerritt's a better fit in Top Gun, but I don't necessarily think I would have hated Top Gun if Louis Gossett Jr. was playing that.
I agree.
To say, for crying out loud, and I want to touch on this, right? Louis Gossett Jr. won an Oscar for, Best Supporting Oscar in the 83, sort of like, in 1982 for his role in Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah.
Right? And like, what's that mean? He wins an Oscar in 82. He's in Iron Eagle in 86.
Yeah.
Like, I think what that actually says to me, and we'll talk about his career in a little bit, but like what that says to me is that like, and even looking at his career, is that it was really unfair. Hollywood, it was very kind of like monoculture. I don't think there was obviously a lot of diversity, not in the stories and the characters playing.
Yes.
Or actors playing characters in those stories, and if you're like, really successful or really, talented and otherwise, sort of like black actor, right? There was probably like another sort of like 12 or 20 of them, right? But they're all going for like one role.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think it's any slight on Louis Gossett Jr. because let's just talk about this for a sec. Again, he wins the Oscar in 82. Oh no, sorry. He starred in Officer and a Gentleman in 82, which then won him the Best Supporting Actor at the Academy Awards that were hosted obviously early in 83.
Yeah.
And then he does Jaws 3D in 83. He does Enemy Mine. I mean, it was directed by Wolfgang Peterson, so that's something.
I love Enemy Mine, and he is. I mean, you can't. No one knows it's him because he's the lizard. He's the lizard guy. Yeah, but he's amazing in that.
Again, so like he's an Enemy Mine in 85. In 86, he obviously does Iron Eagle. He does Firewalker same year with Chuck Norris. I mean, don't get me, as you know, I love Chuck Norris, but holy fuck, you've got an Oscar winner playing like the sort of like the second starring role in a Chuck Norris movie.
Yeah,
what the
exactly.
actual like that makes no sense,
it
right?
Doesn't.
And then he's in Punisher. No, then he stars in a film called The Principal in 87.
I don't know that.
So that's with Jim Belushi. And, think movies like, Dangerous Minds or think, The Substitute. So it's another one of those, sort of like principles in a really sort of like rough urban sort of school.
Right.
Has to kind of like turn it around and so on. So he was in one of those films. He was in The Punisher in 1989 with Dolph Lundgren, the original one.
Oh, that was shot in Sydney.
Yeah. And as you know, sort of like fun fact, I actually worked on one of the films that one of the producers, Sue Armstrong, who produced that, when it first came to Melbourne. But,
yeah, right.
But anyway, he does Toy Soldiers, which I love, actually.
Toy Soldiers, I've got to say, yes. I love Toy Soldiers as well.
It's a fucking great film.
It is a great film.
He does that in 91, and then he does Iron Eagle 3 and Diggstown, which I also really like, that stars, what's his name?
I don't think I know Diggstown.
Oh, it's with James Woods.
Oh, okay.
So he does that in 92. So, I mean, like, kind of, again, like, okay, but not spectacular career, especially thinking that, he wins an Oscar for, back in 83. So, but again, I think it was, the period of time that he happened to be starring in.
Yeah.
Again, like, so what's interesting in terms of a study of contrast as well, if you think of like, again, really, quite incredible, black actors, is that, Morgan Freeman actually auditioned for the role that Louis Gossett Jr. played in Iron Eagle. Now, Morgan Freeman didn't really get his start, probably until, a few years later in Driving Miss Daisy. And then like, bang, tore off an amazing 3-decade career where it was just more or less like hit after hit or solid film after solid film.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just goes to show it just wasn't like too many great roles. For say for people for the most part who weren't like, white.
Yeah.
Right. Which kind of sucks because we could have had a lot more interesting films, over the journey. But interesting, right? So maybe we're doing cast now. Why don't we stick on Iron Eagle and we jump back to Top Gun?
Well, the other things I found about look, Emilio Estevez was considered for the role of Doug. That was the other thing I found. And then James Spader was also considered for the role of Notcher, who's the motorcycle guy, that guy.
He could have done that.
So
he could have done that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Too small a role for him though.
Yes.
So look, the guy, so another small piece of connective tissue between the two films is Jason Gedrick, who plays the young boy in this film, right?
Mm.
So he was actually an extra Risky Business. So that obviously started Cruise back in 1983.
Yep.
And he also had a small role in Born of the 4th of July.
Did he?
Yeah. So he's been constantly working, mostly TV, and he was 20 when he made this film.
Yeah.
But I've got an even funner fact for you. He jumped out of the screen at me when I saw him, and Jerry Levine, aka Styles from Teen Wolf, it's like, fucking Styles is in this film. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Right?
When I saw him, I was like, I'm like, I know who that face is. Where is he from? It wasn't until you messaged me and said, oh my God, Styles is in Iron Eagle. I was like, that's what it is. But the other one is Lamar from Revenge of the Nerds, are his two best mates.
Well, let's pick up on Levine a bit. I want to drill down to Jerry Levine just a little bit, right? So this is only his second feature film. This is his follow-up to Teen Wolf as Stars.
Really?
Right?
There you go.
He was fucking 28 when he made this film. And he's played like a 16, 17-year-old.
It doesn't look 28.
Dude, but he was like kind of doing the same in Teen Wolf.
Yeah.
Just a year younger, right?
Wow.
So, again, like, it's kind of interesting. Like, so the acting thing never really took off for him. Like, after this film, he has a small role in Anthony Michael Hall film that I've never heard of in 1986. He also had a bit part role in Born of the 4th of July. He's also had a small bit part role in K9. Both came out in 89.
Yep.
He had another small role in 1994 Swimming with the Sharks, which I fucking love. I love that movie.
Yep.
He had some TV roles, and then he actually got into directing TV shows.
Yeah, right. So he's known as a director now as compared to as an actor.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So no, I mean, I'm glad it worked out for him because, I mean, he's got charisma, and obviously he's got skills behind the camera as well.
Mm.
So listen, we've probably got a bit more to talk about as it pertains to cast for Top Gun. So I'm going to kick off, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for
the
it.
main man, Tom Cruise.
Okay.
So he's coming off Risky Business and All the Right Moves in 83, Legend in 85. He does this.
Mm-hmm.
Then he does Colour of Money in 86.
Yep.
Cocktail and Rain Man in 88, followed by Born of the 4th of July in 89, Days of Thunder in 90, and then A Few Good Men in 92. I mean, so this film makes him a superstar. By A Few Good Men in 1992, he's the biggest star in the world.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, I mean, absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
And all great films.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think All the Right Moves I like. I don't think it's as strong as some of the other films. Same with Legend. I think I've mentioned that. And then, you've got so many amazing other kind of like actors sort of like in this. So you've got, Val Kilmer, right? Now, Val Kilmer's first film was Top Secret in 84.
Which I love Top Secret.
Also followed by one of your favourites, Real Genius in 85. And then he does this in 86. And look, I've got to be honest, as like I come from the clouds, come from nowhere, that's an amazing run of films. And then he does Willow in 88. And I mean, like, he's got leading man quality through the wazoo. And then he does The Doors in 91, right? And then in 93, he has got a really small but powerful role in True Romance, which I love.
Yep.
And then he starred in Tombstone. And he's fucking amazing in it.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, like, what a career that guy had over that period of time. Like, straight out of the gate for the next decade, he's brilliant. He's brilliant.
He didn't want to do this. He actually didn't want to do Top Gun.
Oh, really?
His agent had to force him to go to the audition because he had little interest in it and didn't want to do it. It wasn't until he got in and then became part of it that he realised, I'll take this film. And then when he got in there, he was like, he always said, I'm glad I'm in it, from then. And then not begged is not the right word, but sought to get another role in Top Gun Maverick, which is
interesting.
Ironically, just before, when he did have his full-blown cancer going at the time. So,
yeah.
But yeah, and that's why Cruise put him in it, because he said, I should be in it. So, yeah.
So let's talk about, some of the other actors kind of like in this. Obviously, I'm going to leave Kelly McGillis to last.
Okay.
Right. So, Tom Skerritt, again, like, he's a guy I've always loved, right? I think kind of a great character actor more than anything else, kind of like over the journey. Like, he was in, Alien, obviously, in 79 as Dallas. He was the sheriff in The Dead Zone, which I love, that came out in 83. He obviously did this in 86. He was in Steel Magnolias in 89, which our mothers loved.
Yeah.
And then he was in the lead in a TV series. I remember it was promoted the hell out of it. And obviously there wasn't much happening on Australian TV back in the early 90s, called Picket Fences, around from like 92 to 96.
Yep.
So I always remember him in those films. I don't really see much or hear much of him over the journey, but when he was in, I think, the right role in the right film, and otherwise he popped.
Yeah.
I always really like seeing him. Michael Ironside, who I always love seeing Michael Ironside, and there's a handful of films that he was in. I always remember him from. There was obviously this, but apparently he was so good in this that he was in full sort of like, dress, and I think someone who's actually from the Navy, obviously junior or otherwise, was like running through the hallways or whatever, goes, and it's like, officer, what are you doing running in my hall, or something to that nature, right?
Right.
And he had such an authoritative sort of voice and sort of commanded that sort of presence as an officer that the guy literally thought he was an officer, came to a stop, turned the corner and kept running again, right?
Right.
He had to get somewhere, which I thought was a fun fact and quite incredible. But I remember from this, Extreme Prejudice in 87.
Yeah.
Total Recall, how can you not remember?
Yes.
It came out in 1990. And then Starship Troopers, right? Like, again, Verhoeven getting him again in 97.
Yeah.
Fucking awesome, right? John Stockwell, he was in Losing It with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Back in 82. He was in Christine in 83. So he plays kind of like the geeky guy's best mate.
Yep.
if you remember that. He does this. He does kind of like bit part roles for the next 14 years, and he started directing.
Yeah, right.
The only thing I really remember of his was Blue Crush that came out early.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly, you've got a really young top, Tim Robbins, right? So he had a role in 1985's The Sure Thing, starring John Cusack.
Yep.
He had this and Howard the Duck in 86. Bill Durham in 88. Starred in as Eric and Eric the Viking in 89.
Yeah.
Cadillac Man with Robin Williams and Jacob's Ladder, which is fucking awesome.
Yep.
Came out in 1990. And then he does Jungle Fever in 91. And then The Player and Bob Roberts in 92. And he's away.
Yeah.
Right? But he was already building a super solid career, and people saw that, he clearly had talent to burn as well, which comes to the final key part, but crucial part of the cast in Kelly McGillis.
Yep.
I mean, she makes Witness in 85, kind of came from nowhere.
Yeah.
Right? And then this in 86. And then she does The Accused with Jodie Foster in 88, which Jodie Foster obviously won the Oscar for.
Yep.
She worked solidly for the next 20 to 25 years, but nothing really of note.
Yeah.
So it's don't get me wrong, again, just like another one of these actors or actresses or otherwise who have these 3 great films in them.
Yeah.
3 is more than most people ever get.
Yes.
But that's kind of it for them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's still working. She's not, she probably wants for nothing and so on and so forth. But just incredible. Kind of comes out with these bursts of creativity or energy or right script choices or, the right scripts get into her that kind of suit her style or otherwise. And that's kind of it for her, which is kind of interesting. So,
well, Tony Scott cast her in this off the back of Witness. So, and he had to push for that because, there were so many other people who were up for the role. So, yeah.
So it's funny, when I saw, and this is how much of the outsized impact that Witness kind of had on me, right? And, notwithstanding, it was also directed by, our boy Peter Weir, another proud Australian. Phenomenal job by him. But again, Kelly McGillis in this film, I've got to admit, it was a little bit jarring for me, for her playing, the love interest or what have you, kind of in this film. It's not to reduce her role just to that, but for the most part, she's kind of playing, that sort of a love interest or emotion for Tom Cruise in this film. And they do have real chemistry. Right. Yeah. And I think that's a credit or a testament to both of them, to both her and Cruise. But she didn't hit the same way for me when I watched Witness. And I actually watched Witness probably either end of last year or sort of start of this year. And she still got that sort of je ne sais quoi sort of about her in Witness. But I also don't know if that kind of poisoned the well in my thinking of her and otherwise. Because when I was hearing this, she kind of feels, sort of a homely, you'd love to have maybe a sort of Aperol spritz with her, or so homely, maybe you just want to churn butter and engage in carpentry with me.
Yeah.
So, but I don't. But was she meant to be a siren or a thing, or what? Because no discredit. I mean, she looks amazing, but doesn't quite hit for me. She hit in Witness. Witness,
yes.
Maybe I should go to Pennsylvania.
I do agree with you on that.
Whereas this one is she looks great, but kind of almost disappears into the 80ness of her character with almost shoulder pads and the big hair, and it doesn't quite come across as alluring as she did in Witness.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, she doesn't. You're right. The allure isn't in this film as strong as it is in Witness, right? Which is part of what made Witness. Yeah. But so I found out. Do you want to know who else was considered for all these roles? This is the who's who of Hollywood. All right,
please.
So originally for Pete Mitchell, they considered the likes of Emilio Estevez, Patrick Swayze, Sean Penn, Rob Lowe, Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen actually fully went into this role for it, didn't get it, but then obviously tried to revisit it a bit in Hot Shots. Michael J. Fox and Ralph Macchio were all considered.
Wow.
On top of that, Tom Hanks, Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, and Matthew Broderick.
So pretty much every young, hot actor in his 20s.
Yeah.
Right.
Matthew Modine was actually offered it and turned it down.
Really?
Because he didn't like the film's pro-military stance and instead went off with our boy Kubrick and did Full Metal Jacket instead.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, and Cruise wasn't actually originally interested in doing this, but it wasn't until he was in London, and he was actually in London doing something, probably parts to do with Legend or post-production,
right,
that he sat down with Ridley, who convinced him to do this with Tony.
Fascinating.
But also, I mean, you were talking about All the Right Moves before. The story goes that Bruckheimer and the writers wrote this for him anyway, off the back of All the Right Moves.
Right.
So the film was kind of written for him as the starring vehicle. So now in terms of Charlie, Brooke Shields, Demi Moore, Julianne Phillips were all considered for Charlie. Demi has stated publicly several times that She did well in her original audition, but then stuffed up her screen test, so she wasn't considered. Also at the time, Deborah Winger, Jodie Foster, and Ali Sheedy were also considered for the role. And as well, there were rumoured, but no one really knows if these were real rumours, Daryl Hannah, Diane Lane, Sarah Jessica Parker, Linda Hamilton, and Tatum O'Neill. So were also considered for the role of Charlie. So
Linda Hamilton would have been fascinating.
yeah, she would have been a really
like Deborah Wing's an interesting one because she's like almost had one of the greatest careers in Hollywood, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, things went pear-shaped or otherwise. But yeah, out of all those actors that you mentioned, Linda Hamilton's the one that kind of like jumps into my mind as a kind of interesting choice, right? That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
That would have been really interesting because, you know, this film is kind of like sandwiched then between Terminator and Terminator 2, right? And the transformation from one film to the other, right? And she would be halfway in between that if you think about it.
Absolutely, because she's meant to be this strong, powerful female character in this film.
So, yeah, I think I mean, that could have worked. That could have worked.
Yeah. Meg Ryan also tested for Charlie, but actually considered herself wrong for the role straight away.
I think that's right.
But then the casting directors remembered her and brought her back for Goose's wife as Carol. So that was really good.
And she pops. Like, she's got a really small, almost nothing role to play, but she's magnetic when she's on screen. So, you know, it's sort of a great job by the casting director and her.
And the only other one, like you said, Lou Gossett Jr., which is interesting, was considered for the role of Viper, Sam, the role there that Scarra played. But also John Voight was apparently up for the role, which would have been quite an interesting one. So
I read somewhere as well that apparently John Travolta was considered for the role of Maverick. But his agent's asking price for him was too high.
Yeah. I think, like you said, pretty much every young, hot actor in Hollywood at the time was considered.
Yeah, I think so.
You know,
and that happens, you know, from time to time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the same thing happened in Scent of a Woman, right? Where Chris O'Donnell got that, but, you know, he was up against Damon and Affleck and pretty much any young actor of a similar age, pretty much in Hollywood at that time.
Yeah.
They're all like
screen tested
same role. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that happens time and time again. So it's interesting to happen for this one.
Yeah.
So, you know, Jeff, why don't we talk about, you know, some of the iconic scenes in this one? Maybe it's a bit unfair if we just over-index Top Gun here. So did anything really pop out for you for Iron Eagle?
What popped out for me at Iron Eagle sometimes is just, like, it is silly, okay? It's a silly film. Like you said, it's that escapist kind of scenario, but just the outrageousness of the way he rescues his dad, right?
Yep.
So he's gone in, he's taken all that flight all the way, he's lost, Louis Gossett Jr. is apparently dead now, he's crashed into the bed somewhere, whatever. But somehow he flies through, destroys all these air bases, gets to the main air base where his old man is, right? Manages, and this is the other thing about Iron Eagle, is like apparently F-16s have an unlimited supply of ammunition for the machine guns because he never runs out, and an unlimited supply of missiles that are somehow hung on the side of his plane. But okay, blows the shit. Every time he fires anything, he blows the living shit. It's like everything has C4 attached to it because everything blows up. Yeah. Like he flies by the air towers, fires his machine guns, but somehow they just explode in these enormous fireballs. I thought that was hilarious. But the fact that he drops that Hades bomb, which is just basically napalm, in the middle of the runway, lands his plane, manages to jump out, run to his old man who's been shot, pick him up, drag him back, get him into the plane. Meanwhile, the bad guys can't drive through the flames because it's, like I said, it's practically napalm, right? And then they do drive through in a truck. So he's like, I'll just shoot a missile at them off a landed plane. Then turns around and flies away. It's like, come on. All right. That's a bit, awesome. Again, probably in the 80s, I watched it and was probably had my fists in the air.
Yeah, so
right?
I'll let that pass.
Yeah. Nowadays, you look at it and just go, oh, geez. Really? Yeah. Oh, all right. The bullshit scene, you know, in Top Gun?
In Top Gun?
Yeah. When they're sitting there and he says, oh, sir, I was inverted. Now, I got to say, that opening scene in Top Gun, I've always had a soft spot where they fly against the MiGs, invert, come down, pull the finger, take the photo, right? So apparently in the sequence where they do the conversation and they're in the hangar and explaining that to Charlie about how it happens, and Kilmer just goes, bullshit. He improvised that. So the look on everyone's faces where they're surprised at him going, oh, right, like that, all real, all natural.
I mean, like, great job by him. Look, you know,
I've got to be honest, upon rewatch, I didn't find too many redeeming moments in Iron Eagle.
I'll agree.
As I said, it was a really heavy lift. I mean, look, I was going to save this for later, but I've literally got nothing to really talk about by way of like favourite scenes or incredible moments or anything like that. So maybe I'll jump and we'll pop maybe over X and spend the rest of our time talking about Top Gun.
That's really all I have to and again, it's not a best scene. I think I put it down as a ridiculous scene. Because it is utterly ridiculous.
Agreed. So interestingly, Emilio Estevez was actually considered for the role of Doug.
Yeah.
As well. So I know he was considered for Top Gun as well.
Yep.
Maybe flying wasn't his thing. But interestingly, he didn't do Top Gun, but he did Young Guns a few years later. So, Guns was in his future.
Yeah.
So fun fact is that this movie is Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai, his favourite movie. And he's watching it in several episodes in Cobra Kai. So I thought that was interesting. The only other interesting thing I had on this film is Chevy Chase was considered for Doug's dad. And you know what? That probably would have taken you out of the movie, but probably would have done it in an okay way.
Wow.
And who knows? Because he does some of those roles remarkably, well, where he is playing kind of like a smaller character and playing a little bit crazy and otherwise. The only other, kind of things that I think to chat about is that you mentioned, obviously, I think the Israeli Air Force, really helped out, obviously, with the making of Iron Eagle. So apparently, in some scenes, some of the ordnance that was carried on the F-16s was real.
Yes.
Not props, right? And at one point during filming, the Israeli Air Force was called upon to carry out a strike against terrorist targets in Lebanon, right? And one of the planes involved in the film was actually called until the controller went, no, hang on, you can't send those guys.
Yeah. No, I saw that as well, is that they actually had to shut down production because the planes were called into active duty.
So I thought that was interesting. And the only other thing as well is that, there's the big bad where, this country that's meant to be a pariah of the Middle East and otherwise, it's never really named. Right?
Oh, it does have a name. It's called Berea?
Yeah, but it's just kind of like a bullshit made-up name.
Right? Of course, yeah.
Where Colonel Masters has been held prisoner, right? The cities of Bilyad and Il Karim are mentioned, right? And it's just meant to be some nation nondescript in the Middle East, but they never really talk about it. Actually, the only other thing that you should chat about is why don't you chat about the super awesome video clip that King Cobra did with Louis Gossett Jr.
But you know what that reminded me of was that it's that very 80s thing of, so King Cobra's Never Say Die, Iron Eagle, right? Which we could sing here but would ruin everything because we are, let's be honest, not great singers.
People's ears would bleed.
It's very much of the time, right? Which was, we make a film, we have a killer song to go with it, which admittedly this song is an earworm that will never get out of your brain, and then we put the band and the actors in the film clip. So you've got King Cobra in there who literally, and it opens with these four, big-haired glam guys sitting there, and then they literally get full military haircuts. Then Lou Gossett Jr. walks in and trains them to be pilots. Meanwhile, they're singing Iron Eagle,
Never say die.
It's just, it's absolutely hilarious. It's almost better than the film, really, because it's just absolutely hilarious.
When you shared with me and you posed that question, I was like, fucking A, right, it's better than the film.
Yeah.
And it was awesome because, you know what? I see everything that I need to see in the 4.5 minutes, however long that sort of video clip goes for, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
And then I'm done. I'm out of the Iron Eagle universe.
Yeah.
I'm surprised as anything, but I guess kind of the greed of Hollywood would never surprise me, but surprised at anything. They made another 3 of these films.
Yeah. But I think, again, they get worse and worse.
A big surprise.
The Jason Gedrick who plays Doug in these two does the first one and the second one. He's barely in the second one and then taps out, and they recast him for 3 and 4.
Why?
So it's a different guy comes in for 3 and 4. So, yeah, he's very much, it's very, again, like you said, probably just something Lou Gossett Jr. did, and probably off the back of who he was potentially could get them up and running. Right. You know what I mean? And they just progressively made, 3 and 4 were direct to video films. They never made cinematic releases. Iron Eagle 2 got into theaters, but never 3 and 4. So
let's switch it up. Let's chat about Top Gun. So many iconic visual images, like we've discussed. I mean, I love so many images in this film. One of them is Tom Cruise racing with his motorbike towards sort of Miramar, as I said, the plane's taking taking off and landing. Another one is when he's pulling up to, Kelly McGillis's house on some, I think, a fictitious street that's meant to be in San Diego called, Ocean Boulevard or otherwise. It's palm-lined streets. You've got, the Pacific Ocean to the left-hand side. Again, graduated tobacco, so the sun's setting. It's just picture perfect, right? It's postcard.
It's such a postcard image, absolutely.
Even the volleyball scene, like the way that's shot, that could be a commercial for anything, right?
Yeah.
That could be kind of, the best version of like a beach volleyball thing done for the Olympics. It could have been anything. There's so many, like the sort of like the dog fights, that they have and the way they film that. And I think you've got some research in terms of, the cameras that were designed to be able to enable some of that. But just some of the footage and how inspired it was filming that and making it literally feel that you were in a cockpit or you were sort of fighting along those jets, or you could actually see kind of almost missile cam in some of those shots. And you really felt that you were in the heat of the battle and otherwise.
Yeah.
No matter where you sort of are looking at the film, you're not disinterested. You don't think it looks ugly or it looks boring or otherwise.
Yeah.
Which is a stark contrast, obviously, to Iron Eagle.
Iron Eagle is very and again, I'm not saying it's technically all the director's fault, but like you said, you got a super stylized director in Tony Scott and Sidney Furie, who's been working for a long time, probably older, just getting the shots, right? So like you said, the visual flair throughout Top Gun you can't even come close in Iron Eagle, right? Even like you said, even the dogfights. It's just the one thing I remember watching in Iron Eagle is just the fact that the main thing is that every time they fly, they just roll the plane. The F-16s just roll, right? Whereas you've got a lot of action in and out with regards to, how the planes and the sequences are shot in terms of Top Gun, right? And yeah, like you said, so Grumman, who makes the F-14, they'd actually designed some specific cameras for another film they helped out with called The Final Countdown, which was shot just years before, which they adapted to this so that they could put 6 cameras on. They had 6 external cameras and 2 internal cameras on each F-14, right?
Yeah.
So they were able to get those shots that we see, like, even just the amazing shot of like from underneath the body of the F-14 taking off an aircraft carrier, the curl, the air curl as it comes off and catches just amazing, visually amazing photography.
So let me jump into one of the iconic, and sort of parodied over the journey sort of like scenes, and that's the volleyball scene. So apparently initially Tony Scott didn't want to shoot the volleyball scene, right? And Paramount was insistent, right?
So, I wonder why.
So he completely flipped this on him and actually did his own thing. So he burned an entire day on actually filming this scene, which is actually hilarious. The scene itself was only 1 paragraph long in the script, and it was scripted as a real game, where they were keeping score and all the rest of it. And Tony shot it like, a commercial, right?
Really?
And massively departed from the script, right? He focused on the bodies of the actors. He covered them with baby oil. And knowing the fact that with the results so homoerotic, he was almost fired, because again, you think mid-80s.
Yeah.
That was generally sort of frowned upon back in the time, right?
Yeah.
And there's even a quote here from, I guess, Chris Lebenzon and his fellow editor, Billy Weber, who said that the studio was so pissed off. And, the head of production, Charlie McGuire, said, I'm going to fire him because he spent a whole day shooting this scene, right? So I think that's just, it's such an alpha move by Tony Scott, being forced to do something that he obviously didn't want to do and then turn into something completely else. But fortune favours the brave, and history has proven him right, because that film, it makes no sense that it's in the film.
Yeah.
There's no introduction to it. There's no setup to it. He just does that film. But it hits, and it's a remarkable film and shot exceptionally well, right? I mean, let's talk about some other things that are actually pretty fascinating, like the establishment of the setup of the rivalry between Maverick and Iceman is fucking elite, right? That should be in filmmaking textbook. This is how you set up an adversarial relationship in the first, 5-7 minutes of filming, right?
Yeah.
There's like the backward glances, there's the sidelong glances, there's a sort of like, the pregnant stares between each other, all this non-verbal communication stuff that's going on. There's that passive aggressiveness, sort of like at the bar, where he does, you've lost that loving feeling, but just before that. It's fucking awesome. And you just tell it's on, and you're invested in that rivalry.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, the setup again of the character and the relationship between Maverick and Goose is equally elite, right? He literally essays being the ultimate wingman.
Yeah.
with everything that he does, right? You know, standing outside, it's getting sort of like chewed out when they do sort of a flyby of the tower, even when they're sort of like told, or even like rewinding even further, sort of like at the very start where they're told they're going to be going to Top Gun and how he's playing off crews and being the beater, if you will, and you know, and what have you. You know, like even when they're kind of like, again, you know, going back to the scenes of the scene in the bar, and he automatically knows the role that he's going to play, and like, I mean, fuck, that's the wingman. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't think there's ever been a better wingman ever than Goose.
Yeah.
And it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
So exceptionally great job by all of those actors, and also, you know, our man Tony Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely fantastic.
So I want to spend a bit of time, if you're okay with this. I mean, I've got some other fun facts, but I want to spend a bit of time talking about the song that left an indelible impression upon me.
Never Say Die, Iron Eagle?
I know the one from the other one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The one from
That's right. We're talking about Top Gun.
Take
Yes.
My Breath Away by Berlin.
Yes.
So won the Oscar.
Okay.
Right, for best song, I think, at the '87 Academy Awards. Fucking fascinating, this song, right? So first of all, it was actually, you know, it was performed by the American kind of like new wave band called Berlin, but it was written by Giorgio Moroder, who, you know, some people kind of like see him as the forefather of disco, sort of, you know,
with Donna Summer.
and so on and so forth. He, you know, he actually co-wrote this with a gentleman by the name of Tom Whitlock as well, right? Now, what's fascinating is what an impact that song had on so many different people. So let me start off first with actually the lead singer of Berlin. Right. So apparently she stated in an interview that her and a band were in Taiwan, right? And they received a call letting them know that the song Take My Breath Away is going to be nominated for an Oscar. And they were asking to fly out to LA to perform the song at the Academy Awards, right? And she told them she would only do it if they could do the entire song. They said, oh, it's actually going to be part of the medley, right? With the other songs that were nominated that year. And she turned it down. Deeply regrets that decision. Bad call by her. Right. But then post that, the prospect of actually singing that song that made Berlin, because like, Jeff, can you name another Berlin song?
No, I cannot.
Right. Literally broke up the band. They didn't want to sing it live. So it was fights and punch-ons. They didn't want to do it. Right.
Wow.
She wanted to be able to, you know, tour the world. Well, other members, they went through it about recording someone else's song for the movie, and even less enthusiastic performing it repeatedly in concert, right? I mean, tragic for them, right? Yeah. Because, you know, hey, you know, one hit wonders and otherwise it is what it is, and like, it's a great iconic song.
Yes.
I still remember, you know, sort of like being at the West Australian Cricket Association ground, or the WACA as it's colloquially known in WA, watching like a one-day international between Australia and England. Well, of course, I'm just a young boy, but, you know, back then, and we had some pretty good seats, and there was these sort of like two young females in front of us, and someone lit up a cigarette, and the two females in front of us, right, started singing "Take My Breath Away," right, as a bit of a sort of like passive aggressive retaliatory action, right, to the person smoking. I mean, like that song cut through. So apparently directors Tony Scott and the producers Bruckheimer and Simpson were so impressed with the song, they decided to use the film in all the romantic scenes between Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis, right? And when I was watching the film this time, right, is that, you know, the first time that, you know, Tom Cruise leaves the volleyball match and then goes to her house and like she's eating crackers, you just tell that like they're gonna fuck. You just know.
Yeah,
right? But none of the lyrics are playing. It's just like the chords of the music.
Now, which we all know. Exactly. Everyone knows that, right? That break. And then there's another scene, right, where again it's just the music, and sort of like the film is almost like the song is like this musical motive for the escalating sexual tension between, you know, Maverick and Charlie. Yeah. Right? And then what's interesting then is that when then the scene where they're obviously about to consummate their relationship. Yeah. The lyrics drop for the first time. Yeah, right.
Right? And I just say, that's fucking fascinating, right? Yeah. And it's just like, you know, whether that's the sort of like, you know, the cocaine influence, you know, coursing through Simpson or Bruckheimer or otherwise, I don't care. It's awesome. It works really, really well for the film.
Yeah, it does. Well, like I said, I guess it just creates extra impact. You know what I mean? So that's cool. That's awesome.
So, Jeff, why don't we talk about some fun facts just about Top Gun? Because I think we've covered what we can of Iron Eagle.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of facts about Iron Eagle. It was originally titled Junior Eagle when it first was written. He titled it Junior Eagle, but changed it to Iron Eagle. The one fact I have is that an Iron Eagle is actually a military officer who's attained the rank of colonel, as in what Chappie is, Lou Gossett Jr.'s character, but will not be promoted to the rank of general. So it's an actual military term. So the term refers to the rank insignia that a colonel wears, which resembles an eagle. And so that's the Iron Eagle. So it's like a colonel who gets this far, but he's never going to become general or higher because either he doesn't have the skill set or his career has not given him, he's not going to get promoted ever again. So that's an actual Iron Eagle.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but with Top Gun, a couple of things I've got. So when they did reshoots, McGillis came back, but the problem was that she'd now dyed her hair brown and she was a brunette. So that was one of the only difficulties they had. So that's why she wears a hat in the elevator scene. That's a reshoot. Right. That's the scene they added in, and that's the reason she's wearing a hat in that scene. Also, McGillis filmed all her scenes barefoot so that her height was the same as Tom Cruise's because obviously she's taller than Cruise. So,
hey, just on that, I heard that Tom Cruise, or I read that, I should say, Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis didn't get along during filming or after filming.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, apparently they, they did briefly reunite. I don't know if it was on the red carpet or otherwise for the premiere of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time in 2010.
Interesting. Okay. I read that David Cronenberg and John Carpenter were both approached to direct, and both of them declined.
You know what? Thank our own personal Jesus that occurred. Because I mean, like, I love Carpenter especially.
Yeah.
And Cronenberg. But yeah, I mean, I'm really glad they passed and let Tony, well, not to say they let him, but them passing enabled Tony Scott to direct this film.
Yeah. So did you know in the film, and obviously we've seen it in other films, the F-14 doesn't use flares or chaff as countermeasures when they're being attacked by the MiGs in the scenes. They just try and fly away from them. So they don't, they shoot flares or whatever to attract the missiles. That was because at the time, the F-14 was still new and the Department of Defense and the Navy didn't want to let the production use them because that would give away the secret of the countermeasures that would make it public knowledge exactly what countermeasures the F-14 had. So they didn't actually let them use that as part of the production.
Fascinating.
Now, the other thing they said was that the MiG-28, which is the bad guy's jet, didn't exist back in that time, right? It was actually created as a device for the film. So that's why they used it, because they knew they could get away with calling it a MiG-28 without pissing off any country, because it didn't actually exist. So, and my last little bit of just useless information, let's say fun facts, they keep calling them bogies in this film, all the bad guys. In technical military Navy thing, you call it a bogey a bogey is a plane that's unidentified.
Right.
So if you're a jet and you see someone, you go, bogey, 10 o'clock, whatever it is. Once that jet is identified, they're either called a friendly, because it's one of yours, or the bad guys are called bandits.
Right.
But the production chose because they liked the term bogey over the word bandit. So that's why they're all referred to as bogies for the bad guys.
It is a cool term. It works for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't know the difference anyway, but yeah, bogey hits.
Yeah. So
interesting. So I've got a couple of things to add, or more than a couple, but I'll fly through these pretty quickly. Pun intended, Jeffrey. So Tom Cruise, John Stockwell and Rick Rossovich all appear together in the 1983 movie Losing It.
Okay.
Kelly McGillis actually fell for Barry Tubb, the character of Wolfman. The guy goes, that gets me hard. Guy with the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And they dated for a couple of years after the film.
There you go.
So apparently Kenny Loggins was not the first choice to record the song Danger Zone for the film. Toto and REO Speedwagon were the two groups prior to Loggins. And you know what? That really would have sucked.
Yeah, they would.
Either one of them
never would have been the same with either of those bands.
No,
definitely not.
No, they really would have sucked.
Yeah.
So I'm happy.
Kudos to Kenny.
Yeah, I'm happy that did not work out. And go Kenny. Right.
Yeah.
The other, kind of interesting things that is Meg Ryan and Anthony Edwards actually became an item after filming concluded.
There you go.
Husband, wife to, a girlfriend, boyfriend for at least a little while. So again, I thought that was interesting. Something else I just want to kind of touch on as well is obviously, just about some of the behind the scenes talent actually on this film. So obviously you don't have this film if you don't have the mega producing, and one of the most amazingly successful producing partnership, I think, for Hollywood across the 80s and 90s in Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. So prior to this, they did Flashdance in 83, Beverly Hills Cop in 84, this film, followed by Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 87 and Days of Thunder in 1990.
Yeah.
Fucking wow. I mean, what I think they did maybe one or two other small things beforehand or whatever, or in between or whatever, but what an amazing 6-7 year run.
Yeah.
To kick off a producing partnership. Incredible, right? You look at the two main writers of this film in Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr.
Yeah.
They, produced, I think, some really solid enjoyable kind of like B movies for us, over a decade.
Yeah.
So, in addition to doing this this coming out in 86, they also did Legal Eagles, starring Daryl Hannah, Robert Redford.
Yeah. I remember that film.
They did Secret of My Success. Obviously, that's Michael J. Fox.
That's a pretty good film.
Yeah. Turner and Hooch with our man Hanks in 89.
Yep.
Dick Tracy in 1990.
They wrote Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, and then a bit of a break, but then they came out with Anaconda in 97, which is
right.
kind of like a guilty pleasure film and stars your doppelganger, Oliver Platt. And then let's talk about the music. Harold Faltermeyer. He was the fucking man. He does Beverly Hills Cop in 84, Fletch in 85, Top Gun in 86, Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 87, The Running Man in 87, Fletch Liz in 89, and Tango and Cash in 89. Boom.
Huge.
Q in the rack, that's fine. That 5-6 year period, absolutely elite. Right?
Yeah.
And so the only other things that I've really got, I haven't got too much else, Jeff, so we can wrap this up pretty quickly, is that the patch on Maverick's flight jacket, the one with the cartoonish figure with the multicolored mohawk, it's the kind of the stylized anthropomorphic feline, and it's got a cocky grin or whatever.
Yeah.
It was designed to reflect a rebellious and confident attitude, mirroring Maverick's personality and the nature of the aircraft, but it's commonly interpreted as the Tomcat patch, which ties to two things. One, directly the aircraft flown by the characters, the Grumman F-14 Tomcat.
Yep.
And also the conjoiner of Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes when they were an item in the early 2000s.
Okay. Well, that's really preemptive. All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So,
well, that leads me to one last question I have for you.
okay.
Which film has the better soundtrack?
I mean, I do love the earworm of Never Say Die.
No, but you've got Queen's One Vision.
It's true.
As in there. There's a couple of other bangers that I can't remember off the top of my head. This has got Kenny Loggins. It's got Berlin. There's a few others in there.
Look, I would say that the ones that stay with me are the ones from Top Gun.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, good question. It forces you to think, but I just think that the iconic nature of those two films, because you can't hear, here's the thing, you can't hear Danger Zone or Take My Breath Away without thinking of Top Gun.
No, true. Whereas you could listen to One Vision by Queen and just go, this is an awesome Queen song.
How good a Queen.
Yeah, exactly
thinking,
right.
Iron Eagle.
Yeah. Until you hear Never Say Die.
Oh, Jeff, that's great. Hey, this was an absolute blast.
Yeah, man.
Really enjoyed doing these two films.
Yes.
Jeff, any idea of what we're doing next?
Let's think about this. What can we do after this? I reckon we're going to let's take some animation, my friends. Finding Nemo versus Shark Tale.
Outstanding. Completely switch it up. Our first animated duo.
Let's do it. All right, mate.
Next time.
Thanks, buddy.